My name is Heather Wilson, and I am 34 years old. I never thought I would be sharing a story like this. 8 years of marriage to Rick vanished with one phone call. I was reviewing marketing analytics when my phone rang. His voice was cold. "Heather, I want a divorce. My lawyer will contact you. Only speak to him." Then silence. My hands trembled. What happened to our life together? Was there someone else? I felt nauseous as my world crumbled. Before I continue this story, I would love to know where you are watching from. Give this video a like and subscribe if you have ever felt blindsided by someone you trusted. Now, let me tell you what happened when my perfect life crumbled overnight. Rick and I met at a charity gala in Boston 10 years ago. I was 24, working as a junior marketing associate and volunteering at the event. He was 26, already making waves at a prestigious investment firm. I remember the moment I first saw him across the room in his perfectly tailored suit, champagne glass in hand, laughing with a group of people who seemed captivated by whatever story he was telling. When our eyes met, the connection was immediate. He excused himself from his group and walked straight to me. "I need to know your name," he said with a confidence that made my heart flutter. That night, we talked until the venue staff began stacking chairs around us. Our romance was a whirlwind. 3 months of dating turned into weekend getaways to the Cape, meeting each other's families, and Rick surprising me with spontaneous picnics in Boston Common. After 6 months, during a weekend trip to Vermont to see the fall foliage, he proposed at sunset on a mountain overlook. I said yes without hesitation. We married the following spring at Rick's family estate in Connecticut. It was everything I had dreamed of, a garden ceremony surrounded by cherry blossoms, 150 of our closest friends and family, and my father walking me down the aisle to Rick, who had tears in his eyes when he saw me. We wrote our own vows, promising to always put our relationship first, to support each other's dreams, and to face life's challenges together. Promises that would eventually be broken. With Rick's family connections and my savings, we purchased a brownstone in Boston's Back Bay neighborhood. Those first years were filled with dinner parties, redecorating rooms together, and Sunday morning coffee on our small balcony overlooking Commonwealth Avenue. We were building not just a home, but a life intertwined with hopes and plans. My career at the marketing agency flourished. I moved from junior associate to team leader, then to senior strategist, and finally to executive director by the time I was 32. Rick proudly attended every work function, introducing himself as Heather Wilson's husband, with a genuine pride that made me love him even more. Rick's career trajectory was even steeper. He made junior partner at his investment firm by 30, and with that came more responsibility, longer hours, and increased pressure. I supported him through the stressful periods, making sure he had home-cooked meals even when he returned at midnight, giving him space when deals went south, and celebrating every victory as if it were my own. We tried to start a family in our 5th year of marriage. I'd always pictured us with 2 children, maybe 3. Rick seemed equally excited, converting our spare bedroom into a nursery before we'd even conceived. But month after month, my period arrived with cruel precision. After a year of trying naturally, we consulted fertility specialists. The next 2 years were a blur of hormone injections, scheduled intimacy, and 3 failed rounds of IVF. Each failure hit me like a physical blow. Rick was supportive at first, holding me through tearful nights and assuring me that we would find a way to become parents. But after the 3rd failed IVF attempt, something in him seemed to shift. He suggested we take a break from trying, focus on our careers, and revisit the idea of children in a year or 2. Reluctantly, I agreed. Looking back, I can pinpoint when things began to change, about 6 months before the divorce call. Rick started working later than usual. Weekend business trips became frequent. When he was home, he was physically present but emotionally distant, constantly checking his phone and stepping out to take calls. I tried everything to reconnect with him. I planned surprise date nights at our favorite restaurants. I booked a weekend getaway to the same Vermont in where he had proposed. I even took cooking classes to recreate dishes from our honeymoon in Italy. He appreciated these gestures, but something was off. His smile didn't reach his eyes anymore. His kisses felt perfunctory. The day before the divorce call was a normal Tuesday. Rick came home around 8, loosening his tie as he walked through the door. We ate takeout Thai food and discussed renovating our kitchen. He seemed engaged in the conversation, even suggesting we look at new countertops that weekend. Before bed, he kissed me and said, "Good night, Heather." Not, "I love you," just, "good night." I should have known something was wrong, but I never imagined how drastically my life was about to change. The call came at 2:17 p.m. on Wednesday. I remember checking the time on my computer screen when Rick's name flashed on my phone. I was in the middle of reviewing campaign analytics for a major client presentation, but I immediately answered, thinking he was calling to check in as he sometimes did during the day. "Hey, is everything okay?" I asked, hearing something strange in the silence before he spoke. "Heather." His voice was flat, emotionless. "I want a divorce. I have been thinking about this for some time, and my decision is final." At first, I thought it was a joke. A cruel, incomprehensible joke. "What are you talking about?" "Rick, what's going on?" "I have already moved some of my things out. I won't be coming home tonight, or any night going forward. My lawyer, Marcus Bennett, will be contacting you. Direct all communication through him." "Your lawyer?" "Rick, we need to talk about this. Whatever is wrong, we can work through it together. We promised. Do not call me. Do not come to my office. This marriage is over and I need a clean break. Goodbye, Heather." The line went dead before I could respond. I sat frozen, phone still pressed to my ear, as if keeping the connection might somehow undo what had just happened. My colleague Jillian knocked on my office door, took one look at my face, and immediately closed it behind her. "What happened? Are you okay?" she asked, rushing to my side. I couldn't form words. The room seemed to spin around me as the reality of Rick's call began to sink in. Divorce. Lawyer. Clean break. These fragments bounced around my mind like shrapnel. Jillian called our supervisor and told her I had a family emergency. Then she drove me home, offering to stay, but I needed to see for myself what Rick had meant about moving his things. Walking into our brownstone felt surreal. Everything looked the same at first glance. The cream sofa we had picked out together, the framed travel photos lining the staircase wall, the antique grandfather clock from his parents ticking in the corner. But as I moved through the rooms, I noticed the absences. His laptop was gone from the study desk. The drawer where he kept his watches was empty. His favorite books had been removed from the shelves. In our bedroom, his closet stood half empty. The expensive suits he wore to important meetings, gone. The worn Harvard sweatshirt he lounged in on Sundays, gone. The monogrammed robe I had given him for our 5th anniversary, gone. He had been planning this, methodically removing pieces of himself from our home while I remained oblivious. I tried calling him. Straight to voicemail. I sent texts that showed as delivered, but received no response. In desperation, I called his office. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Wilson, but Mr. Wilson has stepped out for the day," his assistant said with a formality that made me wonder if she had been instructed how to handle my calls. Next, I called his parents. His mother answered, her usually warm voice now awkward and strained. "Heather, dear, I think you should talk to Richard about this. We love you, but we have to respect our son's decisions." She knew. They all knew. While I had been planning kitchen renovations, everyone around me had been preparing for the implosion of my marriage. Sitting on my bed, I noticed a business card on the nightstand. Attorney Marcus Bennett, Bennett and Schwartz Law Firm. There was a handwritten note on the back. Appointment. Friday, 10 a.m. I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake, replaying every moment of our marriage, searching for signs I had missed, warnings I had ignored. By morning, shock had given way to a crushing mixture of grief and humiliation. I called in sick to work and spent hours crying until my friend Rebecca arrived, having received my incoherent text at 4 a.m. Rebecca held me while I sobbed, making me tea I couldn't drink and offering reassurances that didn't help. When I finally showed her the lawyer's card and told her about the appointment, her expression changed. "Heather, you need your own lawyer before you meet with Ricks. This isn't just about emotions, it's about protecting yourself legally. I can't believe we need lawyers." "We promised to always talk things through," I said, still clinging to the memory of our wedding vows. Rebecca took my hands firmly. "Listen to me. The Rick who made those promises is gone. This man who blindsided you with a divorce over the phone and won't even talk to you? This is someone else entirely, and you need to protect yourself from him." Her words were harsh, but necessary. The fairy tale was over. Prince Charming had transformed into a stranger who had methodically planned his exit from our marriage while maintaining a facade of normalcy. Now I needed to prepare myself for whatever came next. The morning after Rick's call, I woke up with swollen eyes and a clarity I hadn't felt since before the phone rang. Rebecca was asleep on the sofa, having refused to leave me alone overnight. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen island, staring at Marcus Bennett's business card. The shock was still there, but something else was emerging from beneath it: determination. I called my friend Stephanie Campbell, who worked as a family attorney at a different firm. Despite the early hour, she answered immediately when I explained the situation. "Come to my office at 9. Bring any financial documents you can find. And Heather, don't touch any money in your joint accounts yet. Don't move out. Don't agree to anything Rick or his lawyer suggests until we talk." Stephanie's office was in a converted Victorian house in Cambridge, worlds away from the glass and steel corporate buildings where Rick worked. She hugged me before anything else, then transformed into the professional I needed. "First rule of unexpected divorces: protect yourself financially," she said, pulling out a legal pad. "What accounts do you share? Who pays which bills? Do you know all the assets you have together?" I thought I did. Rick and I had been transparent about money from the beginning. Or so I believed. While Stephanie took notes, I logged into our online banking accounts, or tried to. "That's strange. The password isn't working." I tried another account, then another. "He's changed all the passwords." Stephanie's expression darkened. "That's not a good sign. Let's try calling the bank directly." The customer service representative confirmed my worst fears. Our joint savings account, which had contained $85,000 for a future down payment on a vacation home, had been emptied 2 days before Rick's call. The representative couldn't tell me where the money had gone, only that the transfer had been authorized with proper identification. "This is getting worse by the minute," Stephanie said, making more notes. "What about credit cards?" I was still authorized on our joint credit card. The recent transactions showed charges at Tiffany & Company for $12,500 and multiple charges at the Four Seasons Hotel downtown, a hotel barely 2 miles from our home. "He's been staying at the Four Seasons?" I whispered, the implication clear. The jewelry wasn't for me. My phone buzzed with a text from Madison, a mutual friend from our social circle. "Heather, I don't know how to say this, but people are talking. Rick has been seen around town with Jessica from his office. I thought you should hear it from a friend first. Call me if you need anything. Jessica, his 28-year-old secretary." I showed Stephanie the text. "The classic cliché," she said without surprise. "But this gives us something to work with. Massachusetts is a no-fault divorce state, but infidelity can impact property division and alimony if we can prove financial waste." For the next several hours, we gathered whatever financial information I could still access. I found old tax returns in my home office, investment statements Rick had printed for our annual financial review, property tax assessments on our brownstone. Stephanie helped me request a copy of my credit report to make sure Rick hadn't opened any accounts in my name. "Now," Stephanie said as afternoon approached, "let's talk about this meeting with his lawyer. Legally, you don't have to go. In fact, I advise against it until you have formal representation. But if I don't show up, I'll never know what Rick is planning. He refuses to talk to me directly. This might be my only chance to understand what's happening. Stephanie sighed. If you're determined to go, I can come with you. No, I said, surprising myself with my certainty. I need to face this alone. But I won't sign anything. I promise. That evening, 3 of my closest friends came over with wine, comfort food, and fierce loyalty. They helped me search the house for any additional documents Stephanie had recommended finding. In Rick's home office desk, buried beneath warranties and instruction manuals, I discovered a folder labeled personal that contained statements from a bank account I'd never known existed. That son of a bitch has been hiding money, said my friend Lydia, flipping through the statements. This account has almost $40,000 in it. Another friend, Thomas, who worked in IT, helped me recover deleted emails from our shared home computer. What we found confirmed my worst suspicions: messages between Rick and Jessica dating back over a year, plans for weekend getaways disguised as business trips, discussions about their future together. I'm so sorry, Heather, Thomas said, closing the laptop as tears streamed down my face again. But this is all evidence that will help your case. That night, as my friends finally left around midnight, I stood in my bedroom looking at the space where Rick's things had been. The empty hangers in the closet, the vacant spots on the bookshelf, the bare nightstand on his side of the bed, each absence a punctuation mark in the end of a sentence I hadn't realized was concluding. I didn't sleep much, but the hours I spent awake weren't filled with the previous night's despair. Instead, I mentally prepared for my confrontation with Marcus Bennett, rehearsing questions, imagining scenarios, and promising myself that whatever happened, I would not break down in front of the man Rick had chosen to represent him in the dismantling of our life together. By morning, the woman who had collapsed in shock just 48 hours earlier had been replaced by someone new, someone determined to fight for what was rightfully hers, including her dignity. Friday morning arrived with a cold drizzle that matched my mood. I dressed with deliberate care, a charcoal gray suit I'd worn to important client presentations, subtle makeup to hide the evidence of sleepless nights, and my grandmother's pearl earrings that always gave me confidence. Looking in the mirror, I barely recognized the woman staring back, her eyes harder, her mouth set in a determined line. Bennett and Schwartz occupied the 23rd floor of a glass tower in downtown Boston. The elevator doors opened to reveal a reception area of gleaming marble and muted beige tones, designed to intimidate with its understated wealth. The receptionist, a polished young woman with an expressionless face, looked up as I approached. I have an appointment with Marcus Bennett at 10, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. Heather Wilson. Something flickered across her face. Surprise? Discomfort? Before she regained her professional mask. Of course, Mrs. Wilson. Please have a seat. Mr. Bennett will be with you shortly. The waiting area featured leather chairs that probably cost more than my first car and abstract art that said nothing while costing everything. I declined offers of water or coffee, not trusting my hands to remain steady. At precisely 10:05, the receptionist's phone buzzed. Mr. Bennett will see you now. Down the hall, last door on the right. The conference room had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Boston Harbor. On a clear day, the view would have been spectacular. Today, fog obscured everything beyond the nearby buildings, creating a sense of isolation. I had been seated for less than a minute when the door opened. Marcus Bennett was exactly what I'd expected, mid-50s, silver-haired, wearing a suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly mortgage payments. His handshake was firm, his smile practiced, but not reaching his eyes. Mrs. Wilson, thank you for coming. Can I offer you anything? Water? Coffee? No, thank you. I'd prefer we get straight to the point. He nodded, opening a leather portfolio. Of course. I understand this must be a difficult time. My role is to make this process as smooth as possible for all parties involved. Is that what Rick told you? That I'd cooperate with this smooth process after he ambushed me with a divorce over the phone. Bennett cleared his throat. My client has expressed a desire for an amicable separation with minimal conflict. To that end, I've prepared some preliminary documents outlining a proposed division of assets. He slid a document across the table. Even upside down, I could see it was heavily weighted in Rick's favor. I would get to keep some personal items, a small percentage of our investment portfolio, and a generous cash settlement that amounted to about 3 years' worth of my salary. Rick would keep the brownstone, the majority of our investments, and all of his retirement accounts. The document made no mention of the $85,000 he had already taken from our joint savings. Your client seems to have a unique definition of fair, I said, not touching the papers. Bennett's expression didn't change. Mr. Wilson has been the primary breadwinner throughout your marriage. While you have maintained employment, your contributions to the household finances have been substantially less. I see. And does this document address the money Rick removed from our joint accounts without my knowledge, or the funds he's been hiding in a separate account I discovered yesterday? The slight narrowing of Bennett's eyes told me this was news to him. Additionally, he continued, ignoring my questions, my client has evidence that might make a court battle uncomfortable for you. We would prefer to avoid introducing such elements, which is why this offer is as generous as it is. Evidence? What evidence? Mrs. Wilson, let's just say that if fidelity were to become a focus of these proceedings, my client is prepared to present certain documentation. The audacity was breathtaking. Rick was accusing me of cheating? When he was the one who had been carrying on with his secretary for over a year. Mr. Bennett, before we continue, I need to clarify something. You are representing Richard Wilson in his divorce from me, correct? He frowned slightly at the obvious question. Yes, of course. As I mentioned, So, just to be absolutely clear, I interrupted, I am that wife. I am Heather Wilson, Richard's wife of 8 years. The change in Marcus Bennett was instantaneous and dramatic. His professional demeanor crumbled. His face paled. The hand holding his expensive pen began to tremble visibly. He abruptly stood, nearly knocking over his chair. Excuse me, I need to. I'll be right back. As he hurried from the room, I remained seated, confused by his extreme reaction. Looking around the conference room, I noticed a silver-framed photograph on a credenza behind where Bennett had been sitting. It showed him with a younger woman at what appeared to be a graduation ceremony. She looked familiar, though I couldn't immediately place her. Then it hit me with the force of a physical blow. The young woman in the photo was Jessica, Rick's secretary, his mistress, the woman he had left me for. And based on the proud way Bennett had his arm around her in the graduation photo, she wasn't just some random client's daughter. She was his family. The conference room door opened 10 minutes later. Marcus Bennett returned, but he wasn't alone. A younger attorney accompanied him, a woman with a severe bun and glasses who was introduced as Patricia Dawson, another partner at the firm. Bennett looked like he'd aged years in the short time he'd been gone. He sat heavily in his chair, placing his hands flat on the table as if to steady himself. Mrs. Wilson, he began, his voice strained, I find myself in an unexpected and professionally complicated situation. Because you're Jessica's uncle, I said simply. The woman my husband has been having an affair with. Bennett flinched as if I'd slapped him. How did you? The photo on your credenza. I've met Jessica at firm events. I just never made the connection until now. Patricia Dawson cleared her throat. Mrs. Wilson, this creates an obvious conflict of interest that neither Mr. Bennett nor the firm was aware of until this moment. How is that possible? I asked, anger rising. Rick hired his mistress's uncle as his divorce attorney, and you're telling me neither of you knew who I was. Bennett loosened his tie slightly. I was told I would be meeting with an associate from your company regarding a potential investment opportunity. When my assistant informed me this morning that my 10 a.m. appointment was with Heather Wilson regarding a divorce case, I assumed you were the attorney representing Mrs. Wilson, Richard's wife. I had no idea you were." He trailed off, looking genuinely distressed. "So Rick lied to you too," I said, the pieces falling into place. "He didn't tell you who you'd be meeting with today." Bennett exchanged glances with Patricia before continuing. "Mrs. Wilson, I cannot in good conscience continue this meeting. This situation presents a clear ethical conflict. I will be recusing myself from your husband's case, effective immediately." "Before you do that," I said, leaning forward, "I think you owe me some answers. How long have you known about Rick and Jessica's relationship?" Bennett hesitated, then seemed to deflate. "Approximately 14 months. Jessica introduced him as her boyfriend at a family gathering last year. I had no idea he was married until several months later, at which point Jessica assured me they were separated and divorce proceedings were imminent." The timeline matched the changes I'd noticed in Rick's behavior. While I'd been trying to salvage our marriage, he'd been playing the devoted boyfriend to Jessica, even meeting her family. "And now she's pregnant," Bennett said quietly, the words hitting me like a physical blow. "What?" I whispered. Bennett closed his eyes briefly, realizing he'd revealed something I didn't know. "I'm sorry. I assumed you were aware. Jessica is 4 months pregnant. Richard told our family he was expediting the divorce so he could start his new family." The room tilted around me. 4 months pregnant. While Rick and I were discussing kitchen renovations and weekend plans, he was preparing to become a father with another woman. The betrayal was so complete, so all-encompassing that I couldn't even cry. I felt hollow, carved out. "There's more you should know," Bennett continued, his professional ethics apparently giving way to family loyalty or perhaps simple human decency. "Richard approached me about handling his divorce 3 weeks ago. He mentioned evidence of infidelity as leverage against his wife." "That's a lie," I said, finding my voice. "I have never been unfaithful." "I believe you," Bennett said, surprising me. "Because the evidence he mentioned was arranged through a former client of mine who has provided similar services to other clients, fabricated evidence of affairs that never happened." When Richard mentioned this man's name, I should have recognized the scheme immediately. "Are you telling me that my husband was planning to falsely accuse me of cheating to gain leverage in our divorce? When he's the one who's been having an affair for over a year?" Patricia Dawson interjected, "Mrs. Wilson, I must caution my colleague about sharing further details that might compromise attorney-client privilege." "No," Bennett said firmly. "The relationship was established under false pretenses, and I will not be party to fraud." He turned back to me. "Mrs. Wilson, I deeply regret my unwitting role in this situation. I've known Jessica since she was a child, but I cannot condone this behavior. Richard has been manipulating multiple parties, including myself." The professional facade had completely fallen away now, revealing a man caught between family loyalty and professional ethics, apparently choosing the latter. "What about the money?" I asked. "The $85,000 he took from our joint savings?" Bennett looked genuinely surprised. "I wasn't aware of any such transaction. He told me all financial matters would be handled transparently through the divorce proceedings." I laughed bitterly. "Nothing about this has been transparent." For the first time since entering the office, I felt tears threatening. The magnitude of Rick's betrayal, the careful planning, the calculated deception, the sheer cruelty of it, finally overwhelmed me. I covered my face with my hands, not wanting these strangers to witness my breakdown. To my surprise, it was Marcus Bennett who pushed a box of tissues toward me and spoke with unexpected gentleness. "Mrs. Wilson, I cannot represent you, for obvious reasons. But I strongly advise you to seek counsel immediately, today if possible. From what you've told me and what I now understand about Richard's intentions, you need protection." Patricia Dawson nodded in agreement. "I can provide referrals to several excellent family law attorneys who aren't associated with our firm." I took a deep breath, regaining my composure. "That won't be necessary. I've already consulted with Stephanie Campbell. Bennett nodded approvingly. She's excellent. Very thorough. He hesitated, then added, Mrs. Wilson, I want you to know that I will be formally withdrawing as Richard's counsel. I'll cite conflict of interest without revealing the specific nature to protect client confidentiality, but I cannot in good conscience continue to represent him under these circumstances. As I gathered my purse to leave, Bennett stopped me with one final comment. One more thing you should know. Richard asked about Massachusetts laws regarding recording conversations. I believe he may be attempting to provoke you into saying something he can use against you. I would advise extreme caution in any communication with him going forward. I thanked him with a nod, too emotionally exhausted for more words. As I walked out of the conference room, the enormity of what I'd learned weighed on me physically. My husband of 8 years hadn't just fallen out of love with me or found someone new. He had orchestrated an elaborate scheme to discard me while denying me dignity or fair treatment. And he was about to become a father, the very thing we had tried so desperately to achieve together. In the elevator descending from Bennett's office, I pulled out my phone with trembling hands and called Stephanie. I need to see you immediately, I said when she answered. Everything is worse than we thought. I met Stephanie at a coffee shop 3 blocks from Bennett's office, choosing a secluded corner table where we wouldn't be overheard. As I recounted everything that had happened in the meeting, Jessica's connection to Bennett, the pregnancy, the planned false accusations, the hidden money, Stephanie took rapid notes, her expression growing increasingly determined. This changes our approach entirely, she said when I finally finished. We're no longer playing defense. Bennett withdrawing from the case creates a window of opportunity before Rick secures new counsel. We need to act immediately. Within an hour, Stephanie had prepared initial divorce papers citing adultery and financial misconduct. By 3 p.m., they had been filed at the Suffolk County Probate and Family Court. Rick would be served at his office the following Monday morning, a public delivery that would ensure his colleagues knew exactly what was happening. Next, we need to secure your financial position, Stephanie said as we returned to her office. I'm filing for emergency asset freezing based on the $85,000 withdrawal. That should prevent him from emptying any more accounts before the hearing. While Stephanie worked on legal documents, I called our banks, credit card companies, and investment firms, explaining the situation and placing alerts on all our accounts. Several representatives expressed sympathy, mentioning how common such situations were. Their matter-of-fact responses to my crisis were both comforting and heartbreaking. I wasn't alone in this experience, but that meant countless others had endured similar betrayals. We need documentation of the affair, Stephanie said when I finished the financial calls. It may not dramatically impact the asset division in Massachusetts, but it could influence a judge if we can prove Rick used marital assets to fund the relationship. That evening, we met with Michael Reeves, a private investigator Stephanie had worked with on previous divorce cases. He was a former police detective with kind eyes that contrasted with his no-nonsense approach. Standard surveillance package, he said after hearing our situation. Hotel visits, restaurant dates, photographic evidence of public displays of affection. If they've been together for over a year, as you say, they've grown comfortable. Comfortable people get careless. While Michael began his investigation, I focused on gathering financial evidence. The folder of bank statements I'd found was just the beginning. With Thomas's help, I recovered deleted files from our home computer, including spreadsheets tracking money Rick had been moving to accounts I'd never known existed. The most damning discovery came from an old laptop Rick had replaced last year and forgotten in our storage closet. Thomas recovered emails between Rick and his broker discussing ways to temporarily hide assets during a pending life change. There were also messages with a real estate agent about properties in Connecticut, homes Rick had been viewing with Jessica while telling me he was on business trips. This is financial misconduct, Stephanie said when I showed her the evidence. And potentially fraud if he was planning to hide these assets during divorce proceedings. A week after my meeting with Marcus Bennett, Michael Reeves delivered his preliminary report. The evidence was comprehensive and devastating. Photos of Rick and Jessica entering the Four Seasons together, having intimate dinners, shopping for baby items at high-end boutiques. There was even documentation of them viewing one of the Connecticut properties I'd found in the emails. "There's something else," Michael said, hesitating. "During my background check on Jessica, I found some concerning financial transactions. Large cash deposits to her account that correlate with withdrawals from your husband's firm's client trust account." Stephanie's head snapped up. "Are you suggesting embezzlement?" "I'm not making accusations," Michael said carefully. "But the pattern is suspicious enough that it warranted mentioning." This revelation changed everything. If Rick had been misappropriating client funds, it wasn't just our divorce at stake. His entire career and freedom could be in jeopardy. With this new information, I made the difficult decision to visit Rick's parents. Though they had been cool when I called after Rick's divorce announcement, I hoped that presented with evidence of their son's behavior, they might at least hear me out. Elizabeth and Harold Wilson lived in a stately colonial in Brookline. When I arrived unannounced on their doorstep, Elizabeth's surprise quickly gave way to resignation. "I suppose we should talk," she said, showing me into their formal living room. I presented the facts as calmly as I could: the affair, the pregnancy, the financial deception, and finally, the possible embezzlement. I didn't ask for their support or intervention. I simply wanted them to know the truth about their son's actions. Harold, who had been silent throughout my explanation, finally spoke. "We knew about Jessica and the baby. Richard told us you two had grown apart years ago and were essentially living separate lives. Did you believe that?" I asked. "After spending holidays with us, seeing us in our home together? Did that really sound like the truth?" Elizabeth looked away, unable to meet my eyes. "We wanted to believe our son," she admitted quietly. "Has Richard asked you for money recently?" I asked. "Large amounts, perhaps for a down payment on a house?" The glance between them confirmed my suspicion before Harold reluctantly nodded. "For his fresh start," he said. "We gave him $200,000 last month. That fresh start may be needed for legal defense, not a new home," I said, explaining the potential implications of the financial irregularities Michael had discovered. I left the Wilson home with no promises or declarations of support, but the seeds of doubt had been planted. 3 days later, Elizabeth called to tell me they had hired a forensic accountant to review the information they had provided for Rick's house fund and had discovered discrepancies in his story. "We're not taking sides in your divorce," she said carefully. "But we've told Richard we won't be providing any additional financial support until these questions are answered satisfactorily." Rick's response to being served divorce papers was swift and predictable: rage. Late Monday night, after being served at his office, he showed up at the brownstone, pounding on the door and demanding entry. Thanks to Stephanie's advice, I had already changed the locks and installed security cameras. Instead of engaging, I called the police and recorded his behavior, which would later become part of our case file. The text messages began soon after. "You think you're so clever. You have no idea what you're up against. You'll get nothing when this is over. Nothing. You should be careful. People who cross me regret it." Each threat was documented and added to our growing file. Stephanie advised me not to respond to any communication from Rick that didn't come through proper legal channels. Rick's new attorney, Gregory Palmer, was known for aggressive tactics in high-asset divorces. He immediately filed countermotions challenging my claims and demanding an expedited hearing. But our preparation gave us an advantage. By the time Palmer entered the picture, we already had substantial evidence organized and ready to present. Our first court appearance was scheduled for early June, just over a month after Rick's initial divorce call. The night before, I barely slept, rehearsing answers to potential questions and trying to prepare myself for seeing Rick face-to-face for the first time since everything had fallen apart. The courtroom was smaller than I had imagined, with worn wooden benches and fluorescent lighting that made everyone look slightly ill. Rick arrived with Palmer moments before the hearing began. He looked thinner than I remembered, his usually impeccable appearance slightly disheveled. He didn't look at me once. Judge Eleanor Watkins, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s, reviewed our filings before addressing the attorneys. "This case has more flags than a parade," she remarked dryly. "Financial misconduct allegations, adultery claims, emergency asset freezes. Let's try to establish some basic facts before things get more complicated." Palmer attempted to portray me as a vindictive wife lashing out with false accusations, but Stephanie methodically presented our evidence: the bank records, the emails, the private investigator's photographs, and most damaging, a statement from Marcus Bennett confirming his withdrawal from the case due to undisclosed conflicts of interest. As the hearing progressed, Judge Watkins became visibly disturbed by the pattern of deception revealed in our evidence. She granted the continuation of the emergency asset freeze and ordered a full financial disclosure from both parties within 30 days. "Mr. Wilson," she addressed Rick directly at one point, "these financial discrepancies require explanation. If funds have been improperly transferred or hidden, this court takes a very dim view of such behavior." Rick's face had gone pale. Palmer requested a brief recess to confer with his client, which was granted. When court resumed 20 minutes later, Palmer's tone had changed dramatically. "Your Honor, in the interest of efficiency, my client would like to explore settlement options rather than prolonging these proceedings." It was the first crack in Rick's facade, a tacit acknowledgement that his position had weakened considerably. As we left the courtroom, Stephanie squeezed my arm. "That's their way of waving a white flag. They're scared." The final blow to Rick's case came unexpectedly. 2 days after our court hearing, he was placed on administrative leave by his firm pending an internal investigation into financial irregularities. The timing suggested that our divorce proceedings had triggered scrutiny of his professional conduct. A week later, Gregory Palmer contacted Stephanie to initiate settlement discussions. Rick's position had deteriorated beyond salvaging. His firm's investigation had uncovered evidence supporting our suspicions of financial impropriety. His parents had withdrawn their support after learning the full truth, and Jessica, upon discovering the extent of his deception, had apparently begun to question their relationship. When my phone rang with Rick's number nearly 2 months after his divorce bombshell, I almost didn't answer. When I finally did, his voice sounded nothing like the confident man who had coldly dismissed our marriage. "Heather," he said, a slight tremor in his voice. "We need to talk. Not through lawyers. Just us. Please." "Why now, Rick? You made it very clear you didn't want to talk to me." "Everything's falling apart," he said, his voice breaking. I made terrible mistakes. The firm is pressing charges. Jessica's gone back to her parents. I need this divorce settled before things get worse." The man I had loved for 10 years, who had once held me through failed IVF treatments and celebrated every career advancement, was now begging for mercy. Not reconciliation, not forgiveness, just a quick end to the legal battle that was now the least of his problems. "Talk to Stephanie," I said after a long pause. "I have nothing to say to you outside of legal channels." Then I hung up, feeling neither triumph nor satisfaction, just the quiet certainty that I was finally taking care of myself first. The divorce was finalized in November, 8 months after Rick's life-changing phone call. The terms were far more favorable than his initial offering through Marcus Bennett. I received the brownstone, which I later sold, half of our investment portfolio, my full retirement accounts, and a substantial portion of the assets Rick had attempted to hide. The judge had been particularly unsympathetic to his financial misconduct, especially after his firm's investigation resulted in his termination and pending criminal charges for embezzlement. Jessica had her baby in August, a boy. I learned this not from Rick, but from Elizabeth Wilson, who had begun calling me occasionally after the truth about her son's behavior came to light. Our conversations were awkward at first, filled with her unspoken guilt for initially believing Rick's lies about our marriage. Over time, they evolved into a strained but genuine connection. She had lost her daughter-in-law, but gained a grandson under circumstances that left her conflicted and grieving for what might have been. She named him James, Elizabeth told me during one call. Not after Richard or anyone in her family. She said she wanted him to have his own identity. I never met James, though sometimes I wondered about this child who, in another reality, might have been the baby Rick and I had tried so desperately to conceive. I didn't hate him, or even Jessica anymore. The pain had gradually transformed into something more like pity for the difficult road ahead of them, for the foundation of lies upon which their relationship had been built. The first thing I did after selling the brownstone was rent a bright, open apartment overlooking the Charles River, a place with no memories of Rick, no ghosts lurking in empty closets or echoes of arguments in the kitchen. I filled it with new furniture, colorful art I'd always loved, but Rick had deemed too eclectic, and plants that required nurturing attention. At work, I accepted a promotion I had previously declined because Rick thought the travel requirements would interfere with our plans to start a family. The new position as global marketing director meant frequent trips to London, Singapore, and Los Angeles, cities where I could reinvent myself with each passport stamp, building a life defined by my choices rather than my marital status. My circle of friends had shifted during the divorce. Some mutual friends had quietly disappeared, uncomfortable with choosing sides. Others had rallied around me with unexpected loyalty. Stephanie, initially just my attorney, had become a close friend, inviting me to her family's Thanksgiving dinner and introducing me to her network of strong, accomplished women. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I encountered Rick unexpectedly at a coffee shop near my old office. I almost didn't recognize him. He had lost weight, his designer clothes replaced by a rumpled button-down and khakis that seemed a size too large. The confident swagger was gone, replaced by a hunched posture that made him appear older than his 37 years. He saw me before I could leave, his eyes widening with recognition and something like shame. "Heather," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I nodded politely, ordering my coffee and preparing to leave, but he stepped closer. "Can we talk?" "Just for a minute." Against my better judgment, I agreed to sit at a small table in the corner. Up close, the changes in him were even more apparent. Gray streaks in his hair, deep lines around his eyes, a nervousness in his movements that had never been there before. "I wanted to say," he began, then stopped, staring into his coffee cup. "I'm sorry. For everything. The way I handled things. The lies. You deserved better." It wasn't the grand apology I had once imagined during those first raw weeks after his call. It was halting, inadequate, and yet somehow more genuine than anything I had expected from him. "What happened with the charges?" I asked, not ready to accept or reject his apology. "Plea deal. Probation, restitution, community service. No jail time, but my career is over. No firm will touch me now." "And Jessica? The baby?" He flinched slightly. "She's in Connecticut with her parents. James is. He's beautiful. I see him on weekends. Jessica and I tried to make it work, but there was too much damage. Too many lies." He looked up at me finally. "I destroyed everything good in my life, Heather. Our marriage, my career, my relationship with Jessica. All because I thought I deserved more, deserved better. I was wrong." I felt no satisfaction in his downfall, no vindication in his regrets. The man sitting across from me was a stranger who happened to share memories with someone I had once loved. "I hope you find peace, Rick," I said, standing to leave. "I really do." Are you happy?" he asked as I gathered my things. The question gave me pause. Was I happy? The past year had been the most challenging of my life, filled with betrayal, legal battles, and the painful dismantling of the future I had planned. But standing there, looking at the broken man who had once been the center of my world, I realized the truth. I'm getting there, I said honestly. One day at a time. Walking away from that coffee shop, I felt the last weight of my marriage finally lift. The divorce hadn't just been an ending. It had been the beginning of a journey back to myself, a self I had partially surrendered in the compromises and accommodations of partnership. 1 year after Rick's divorce call, I attended a literary festival with my friend Rebecca. While browsing books at an outdoor stall, I literally bumped into Daniel Harrison, a literature professor who had been in the middle of an animated discussion about Gabriel Garcia Marquez. He apologized, I laughed, and somehow we ended up getting coffee and talking for hours about magical realism, travel, and the unexpected paths our lives had taken. Dating again was terrifying. Every compliment made me question motives. Every unanswered text triggered insecurities. Daniel was patient, understanding when I needed space and present when I was ready for closeness. Unlike Rick, he didn't try to direct my life or shape me into his ideal partner. He appreciated my independence, celebrated my successes without competition, and shared his own vulnerabilities without weaponizing them. The lessons from my marriage and divorce were profound. I learned that trust is not a one-time grant, but a continuous choice that must be earned and maintained. I discovered that self-respect is non-negotiable, that red flags don't disappear with wishful thinking, and that sometimes the most loving choice you can make is to walk away. Most importantly, I learned that forgiveness isn't about excusing someone else's actions. It's about freeing yourself from the burden of anger. I eventually forgave Rick, not for his benefit but for mine. I even found a way to forgive myself for the warning signs I missed, the compromises that diminished me, and the years spent trying to fit into someone else's vision of who I should be. So here's what I want to share with you. From the other side of heartbreak, your worth is not determined by someone else's ability to recognize it. The end of a relationship, even a marriage, is not the end of your story. It's simply the closing of one chapter and the beginning of another, one where you get to be both the author and the hero. Have you experienced a betrayal that eventually led to unexpected growth? Share your story in the comments below. If this video resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more stories of resilience and transformation. Remember, sometimes the most painful endings lead to the most beautiful beginnings. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, you are stronger than you know, braver than you believe, and worthy of the love you give so freely to others.